Welcome to today's webcast. This call is being recorded, and now to begin the program, I'd like to introduce Tracy Cook.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone, to today's webcast, Combating Ransomware After Infection. It's Never Too Late to Close the Barn Door, sponsored by Infoscale. I'm Tracy Cook with Virtualization Review, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Before we begin, let me take care of a few housekeeping details. Please feel free to type your questions into the Ask a Question box on the console at any time during the presentation. Infoscale has provided a Locky ransomware article that can be found in the green folder at the bottom of your console. We will address as many of your questions as we can today during the live event, and the entire webcast will be recorded and will be archived for future viewing. We'll send you an email when the replay is available, and that should be in approximately 24 to 48 hours. And you can access the replay using the same link you used today. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Ken Shaw from Infoscale. Ken serves as the CEO and CTO of Infoscale. He's an experienced engineer, entrepreneur in the disaster recovery and cloud backup industry. For the past 12 years, he has founded and operated several software companies focused on building massively scalable cloud storage systems for disaster recovery, backup, archiving, and online collaboration. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Ken. Ken, please take it away.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending upon where in the world you're joining us from. Today, we're going to be talking about ransomware and the intersection between ransomware and backup and disaster recovery strategies. Thank you very much, Tracy, for that introduction, and looking forward to doing the Q&A in a little bit. A few additional housekeeping items. There will be a recording of the webinar distributed. It'll be on infoscale.com/webinars, and I believe you get an email of the webinar, so you can share it with your friends and colleagues or significant others, because this is going to be an incredibly exciting informational session. There's also going to be an email with the slides in question. I'm not certain if you can do it with the On24 software, but generally we let you download the slides we're presenting actually as part of the experience. And Tracy, maybe you can confirm that. Can they download the slides during the presentation?
No, we'll be sending them out after the presentation in the follow-up email, and they should receive that tomorrow.
Terrific. Okay. And then, as Tracy said, there's the Q&A tool. Now, this is a bit of fun. We're actually giving away a prize today for the person who asks the most on-topic questions. So don't ask me about Cleveland and Golden State, but if you do ask me about BDR or ransomware, then you're in the running for an Xbox One. And if for whatever reason you really hate the idea of an Xbox One, we'll actually replace it with another electronic gift of a similar price point. So we do this to encourage participation. These things are far more educational for all of us and far more entertaining for presenters like me if it's dynamic. So find the questions tool, start asking questions, ask questions throughout. We'll be doing a dedicated Q&A at the end, and you know, we would love to give you an electronic doodad. I'm personally partial to the Xbox One, but it could be a PlayStation 4 or it could be a drone. So find the questions tool, start asking questions, and we'll get to that at the end. And that's about it. Oh, I guess my contact details are here. So if you would like to reach out to me or anyone from Infoscale, here are all my details. I'm the CEO and founder of the company, and I like to talk to both customers and just people in the industry. So feel free to contact me for, you know, just to have an intellectual conversation about the state of BDR if you'd like. And with that, let's have a look at today's agenda. First thing we're going to look at is the rise of ransomware, which is why you're all here. It's been sort of a scary new development in the cybersecurity sort of tapestry that we're all dealing with. We'll then turn to prevention best practices. What's the best way to not get infected by ransomware? After that, we'll look at if you get infected, what do you do, right? And so, you know, sort of the metaphor I like to use in this is imagine that you are Bill Gates. You want to protect your children and make sure they don't get kidnapped. But then if they do get kidnapped, what do you do, right? This is the metaphor we're going to be using throughout here. It's, we all watched Taken over the weekend, and that's inspired today's presentation. And then lastly, we'll do the Q&A and the prize giveaway. So let's dive in. The evolution of ransomware. Ransomware pushes are increasingly targeting small businesses and non-profits. You know, I was doing some reading just this morning, and the number of ransomware attacks for the first 6 to 12 weeks of 2016 it was going along at roughly 10,000 attacks per week. Now, these are attacks reported to the FBI in North America. Over the last 6 weeks, that number has doubled and is now right around 25,000 attacks per week. Now, that data is coming from Symantec, who's running a global audit of ransomware attacks, and that is kind of terrifying, right? That within the space of just 6 months, here we are in June, within the space of 6 months, we've seen the average number of ransomware attacks per week double, and we're only just getting started. And so what is this ransomware I speak of? Here's a definition from Wikipedia for those of you who don't know what ransomware is. It's a type of malicious software designed to block access to a computer until a sum of money is paid. And it is that second clause there, until a sum of money is paid, that sets ransomware apart from every other Trojan or worm or virus that we've ever seen in commercial computing. And so security has long been a sort of core tentpole of enterprise infrastructure IT, and has long been a fear point among consumers and business users that drives a lot of revenue for the IT industry. But never before have the bad guys had an economic incentive the way they do today. And so we're talking about an absolute sea change in the economics of online criminality, right? That fundamentally changes their motivations and the amount of effort that they're willing to put into it, and the damage that they can do to you as an individual, and the damage that they can do to you as a business owner or a professional who's responsible for a business network. Let's have a little sort of trip down memory lane and look at some of the more interesting sort of ransomware attacks. This technology, or this sort of hack vector, isn't new. It's been around since the 80s. Now, early types of ransomware, all of them were based around sort of faking the blocking of access to your computer. So what they would do, generally speaking, is they would redirect your boot sector, or they would redirect, your shell exe within Windows, and they would fake a lockout of your system. Now, sophisticated users would know how to handle this, but most people didn't. And in most cases, these then required you to sort of wire some money to somebody who would fix it or buy a product. And of course, this was all relatively easy for the FBI and other federal law enforcement agencies to track down and shut down, right? Interestingly, there were sort of two massive vulnerabilities in these ransomware ecosystems. The first was that the actual way in which they disabled your access to your computer was pretty crappy, right? So by redirecting a few OS files or pretending you were locked out, that wasn't super insurmountable, and for your average sort of engineer to come in and deal with that, it was easy to heal. Secondly, the way you paid these kidnappers, right? And we need to come up with a term to describe these people, and I'm going to use kidnappers for the rest of this webinar because it really conjures up the type of damage and the type of extortion that they're engaging in. The way that you paid these folks was generally through financial mechanisms that were traceable. Now, two things happened over the last 10 years. The first was the rise of computationally efficient encryption algorithms that allowed for asymmetric encryption of data, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. And the other is the rise of an anonymous payment currency, particularly Bitcoin, but also recently Ether and other digital currencies. With the previous generation of ransomware, what they would do is they would either rename some files or they would redirect the master boot record, but they were actually just doing tiny little surgical modifications to your system to make it unavailable to you. With the rise of asymmetric and highly efficient encryption algorithms like RSA, throughout the 90s, in particular most famously promulgated by CryptoLocker, ransomware started to encrypt either your operating system files or your key data files, and doing it with a key a keyed system that was very difficult to break. To give you a sense, they would encrypt, say, your home computer, encrypt all of your personal photos, and it's the sort of thing where you would need, a supercomputer to decrypt it, right? They were starting originally with 600-bit keys, then they moved it to 1,024-bit keys. Effectively not decryptable. So the technology got a lot better at blocking you from your content. That was one vector in which these criminals improved their operations. And they are criminals. Let's just be extremely clear about that. The ransomware threat is being promulgated by technically savvy, organized criminals. On the other hand, they then had a new weapon in their arsenal for collection of monies, right, in Bitcoin and Ether and other anonymous digital currencies. This was a way in which they could actually be paid without the authorities ever being able to track it down. Now, CryptoLocker is sort of one of the more famous ransomware networks, and it was being run out of a botnet of hundreds of thousands of computers around the world. And the FBI finally shut that down in cooperation with federal law enforcement agencies from various countries, particularly in Europe, because its origin was in Eastern Europe. So eventually they shut the botnet behind CryptoLocker down, and that was after they had extracted tens of millions of dollars worth of ransom payments from their victims. And again, victims is the appropriate word. Now, the problem is that since then, the number of strains of ransomware has proliferated massively, and the number of techniques that they're using to attack systems has increased in sophistication epically. So on the far right-hand side of this diagram is Locky, and we're going to talk about Locky in a few slides' time. But if there's one thing you take away from this webinar, it's this. Hacking has always been a fringe activity for sort of nerds around the world. I say that with pride, I'm a nerd. But historically, hacking has generally not had an economic incentive. In general, it's been the equivalent of nerdy graffiti, right? It was, you would sort of make your mark. It was vandalism. You could vandalize a wall with a spray can, or you could vandalize a website. This is the sort of thing that sort of amateur hackers participated in. With the rise of ransomware, all of a sudden there is a massive economic incentive for sophisticated computer criminals as well as very unsophisticated, just sort of script kiddies, to participate in what we all consider to be very malevolent B2B hacking and really extortion, right? So if we're going to apply the legal words that apply to this conduct to it, it's not just ransomware, it is blackmail and it is extortion. These are felonies. So all of a sudden you have teenagers across the United States and people all around the world engaging in digital blackmail and felonious behavior easily from their computers at home. This is a complete sea change in sort of the tapestry of the digital threat universe, right? No longer are we concerned about our networks being taken down or our websites hacked for fun. Now we're talking about a digital economy that is reaping tens of millions of dollars to bad actors. Okay, so this is the context, and it's only getting worse. Our general preparedness for this threat is horrible. Our preventative mechanisms that we can put in place from third-party vendors are relatively unsophisticated. So this is a problem that is only growing in its scope and its intensity, and it's something that you're going to need to be all across, not just now, but for the next couple of years. So with that little speech behind me, let's go forward and look at some of the numbers. So ransomware trends. 2,900 new malware modifications were detected in 2016. These are just variants of ransomware. 72% of ransomware victims were unable to access their data for 2 days, and we're going to look at the cost to the American economy of that single number. $209 million has already been paid out in the first 3 months of 2016, and this is a 90% increase over the amount of ransomware bounties that were paid in Q1 of 2015, right? We're looking at almost 100% expansion year over year. It's crazy. And we're going to get to the importance of phishing attacks in this, but phishing is one of the main ways that these criminals propagate their payloads, and 34% of SMBs in the United States fell prey to phishing attacks in 2015. So where do we go next? Well, one of the first things I want to walk you through is Actually, you know what? We're going to go back a slide, folks. I think I might have made a mistake. There we go. So ransomware in the news. You all would have seen this coverage, but ransomware is a global phenomenon. Often it's being, the attacks are actually being coordinated out of Eastern Europe and Russia. And we've seen enormous phishing attacks impacting tens of millions, even 100 million unique email addresses in recent months. The second major trend that you need to be aware of is that the ransomware community has quickly started to target business. 3 years ago, this was something done by sort of script kiddies in their basement targeting. Frankly, not targeting, okay? It was, they would go after anybody they could get into, and they weren't really targeting anyone. And so they were just as likely to get your mum and her sort of pictures of, you know, her 40th school reunion as they were to target a hospital. Well, that has changed. The number of ransomware attacks that are targeting businesses, particularly mission-critical businesses, hospitals, police departments, emergency departments, schools, and just general small business has skyrocketed. In fact, a tenfold increase over the last 24 months, according to Kaspersky. And then you've got the development of far more sophisticated ransomware threat vectors, like, for example, Locky, and we're going to talk more about Locky, but here's a ransomware tool that is designed not just to infect a single computer, but in fact to cripple the entire network that it's on, not just encrypting the data on the drives that are attached to the computer or the host computer that's infected, but the network drives of any other computer that can get access to. So now, one muppet in your accounting department who clicks on the wrong link can infect your entire corporation and start to encrypt all of the data on your centralized NAS servers or file servers, right? We all know that your perimeter security isn't perfect. We all know that it's only as good as the sort of baseline internet hygiene participated in by all of our employees. What's terrifying about Locky is that not only could a slip-up by sort of someone in accounting lead to the compromising of that particular workstation, but through the way the algorithm works, that could now infect and debilitate your entire corporate infrastructure, to, you know, putting entire departments or entire organizations out of operational, their ability to sort of meet their operational, you know, demands. So let's now look at how do you know if you're infected. First thing is, all of a sudden as a user, now this is tricky, right, because most of the people on today's webinar are going to be sysads, right? But the first thing is, from a user's perspective, they're going to start getting errors when they open files. Now this is hard for you to watch for as a sysad. Second thing is, obviously, this is really clear, is a window is going to pop up demanding the ransom. This is the equivalent of getting the note in the mail that's been, you know, put together from little cutouts from newspapers that say, I have your cat, right? So when you get that notice, that's pretty clear at that point that they have encrypted your system and now they're demanding their hostage payment. Third one would be that you, this is a particularly nefarious override on some of the behaviors we've discussed, is that modern ransomware has started to do a countdown clock where they'll originally demand $500, but if you don't pay the ransom instantly, they'll then up that to $1,000 or $2,000. Another thing to look for, and we're going to talk about how we can help with this, is the creation of a whole bunch of different files in your file system. For example, how to decrypt my files.txt. And so, you know, here is the question. If you get hit with ransomware, should you pay the ransom? Amazingly, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's recommendations to business in the United States of America is that, yes, you should. So here we are as a country. Well, I'm a foreigner. Some of you may not have noticed from my accent. But this country's position is we don't negotiate with hostage takers, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and yet the official recommendation from the FBI is pay the ransom. Because there is no universal panacea, there is no universal solve to actually deraveling these ransomware attacks. And so there's this awful, awful calculus going on which says it is easier and cheaper and smoother to just pay the ransom than it is to risk the kidnappers destroying all your data, right? Which is horrifying. And I mean, not to sort of dramatize this, but if we took the policy that every time a hostage was kidnapped in Africa or the Middle East or in South America that we would pay the ransom, then I guarantee you the number of kidnappings that occur in the Middle East or Africa would quintuple, right? And it is that very effect that we've seen with ransomware. Because we have been paying the ransoms, we've seen a 100%, a 500%, just an explosion in the number of ransomware attacks. So unsurprisingly, by allowing the criminals to actually benefit from these attacks that they're making, and because we are paying the ransoms collectively as a Western society, they are continuing to double down, to invest in research and development, to develop more and more virulent strains of their ransomware payloads, and increasing the ransoms. And it's that last thing which is very scary for small business. So various strains of ransomware to be sort of aware of: Ransom32, Locky, CryptoLocker, Cerber, JS FakeBot. Frankly, you really don't care about these various strains, right? Here's what you need to know about them. They're evolving very quickly. There are now hundreds, if not thousands, of different strains of ransomware. It's very unlikely that your antivirus system or your security system can detect all of these and prevent you from zero-day attacks. That some of these are in fact toolkits allowing very unsophisticated hackers to deploy ransomware payloads to attack your network with just several clicks of a button. This is a billion-dollar industry, folks. So you've got to understand this. For whereas once upon a time securing your network was, well, it's all of our jobs, right? But the enemy generally didn't have an economic incentive. If you were protecting Boeing's network, or if you were protecting a government network, sure, you were up against some of the most sophisticated attackers on Earth, and they did have an economic incentive. But generally speaking, you have never had a security adversary that compares to the adversaries you have now. Why? Because they're being motivated by thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. So if you think security has been an important part of your digital life for the last 20 years, you're actually kidding yourselves. For the last 20 years, the guy on the other end of the line was probably participating in indiscriminate vandalism. Today, he has a clear economic motive. I was sitting in the conference room of a bank recently. This is a billion-dollar balance sheet bank. And they were telling me how they spent $100,000 responding from a ransomware attack. They didn't pay the ransom. They spent $100,000 failing over to SunGard and then running all of their operational systems out of SunGard for several months before they then failed back to their production systems. Right? Now, that was a smart hacker who targeted them with weak security and knew that a billion-dollar bank would potentially pay the bounty. There's another story, I think it might be actually in this deck, of a hospital here in Los Angeles who, because they were taken down, paid a $17,000 bounty just to make sure that they were back up and running. So that's a great segue to our next slide, which is that isn't antivirus protection enough? Question mark. And the answer is absolutely not. A couple of things to know about your typical security software suites. First thing is that they're signature-based, and you can't possibly keep a signature-based system up to date with the type of attack frequency that we're seeing in the ransomware world. For example, new threats are being created at a rate of 3.5 per second. That's largely because of these kits that these criminals can get their hands on, right? It allows them to spawn new ransomware payloads very, very easily and very, very quickly. You've also then got the rise of what's called metaformic malware. This is just fancy talk for software that's smart enough to hide itself in different ways and to just sort of dynamically try and trip and trick the existing AV system on your computer. And then, of course, many users disable antivirus protection. But look, sit back, right? Think about your network. You've got between 100 and 1,000 endpoints, is what I'm told, based on today's audience. And who knows how many VMs you've got. Are you certain that every single one of those is imperviously protected? Because if not, here's what's different about modern-day ransomware. Previously, if one computer got infected, it got stuffed up. And that was annoying, but you could shut it down, and that was the end of it. With ransomware, that one exposed node can start to infect and impugn your entire network infrastructure. If it has access to shared drives, to a shared NAS, to a file server, it will start to encrypt and disable core infrastructure at your company. And so all of a sudden, the impact and the risk associated with a single breach has increased exponentially over what it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We're talking about breaches going from being an annoyance to being a debilitating event. Now let's bang on because I'm a little bit behind time. So the next slide, is a poll actually. So we're going to throw this back to the moderator and we're going to do a poll here.
Great.
Tracy, you there?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Can you hear me on the line or not?
This is Ken, Tracy. We can hear you. All right, so the poll question for the audience is, when it comes to ransomware, which of these is you? The first answer is yes, I've been a victim of ransomware. The second one is no, I've never experienced this type of security breach. And the third one is I don't think I'll be affected.
And I
so,
now.
No worries. So, Tracy, I think that we have the poll on screen for the audience. Perhaps you can tell us. But I read out the poll questions, and really we're just asking the audience, what is their current status when it comes to ransomware?
Okay. I will go ahead and I'll push the results and see what the audience is saying. So far it looks like the answer is I haven't experienced this type of security breach. What do you think?
Yeah, well, so 22% here saying they have been a victim of ransomware. That's about right. Of the 74% who say they haven't experienced it, unfortunately, and this is kind of scary, there's a good percentage of those people who actually have been a victim of it. They just don't know it yet. Right, and this is one of the more insidious kind of properties of these attacks that we're going to talk about soon. And then those who say, I don't think I'll be affected by ransomware, those are the courageous warriors in the audience. Let's see if they still feel the same way at the end of today's presentation. So with that, we'll bang on. Avoiding ransomware. Okay, so always have a backup plan. This is certainly the way I live my life. But Pliny the Elder said, the only certainty is that nothing is certain. And Bruce Schneider, a security guru, said the single most important thing any company or individual can do to improve their security is to have a good backup strategy. It's been true for decades, and it's still true today. And I might add, Ken Shaw, it will always be true. The ultimate sort of defense against any attack is the ability to turn back time. And, you know, without sort of giving props to Cher, she nailed it in that song. And that's what we here at Infoscale do, is we give you a time machine and we let you turn back time to the day before you got attacked. Now, if we ask Gartner, sort of, you know, the world's leading analyst firm on what they think you should do when it comes to defending against the ransomware threat, number one, they'll say assemble a crisis team. Now, that's a sort of big bureaucratic company thing. So let's just agree that the crisis team is probably you and, you know, your director of ops or someone else in the department, right? But there is going to be a guy. There's always a guy who is on point for an attack to perform regular backups. And this is why we here as a backup and disaster recovery company are putting on this webinar, right? Because the ability to turn back time is the ultimate solve for ransomware attacks. 3, document storage repositories. 4, evaluate the risk. 5, create a recovery plan. And so, just going a little step further, in fact, here are 10 practical steps for prevention. Some of these are really in the weeds, but let's go through it. 1, back up your data often. And no matter what article you read out there on the internet about ransomware, they're all going to lead with back up your data often because, again, to quote Cher, you need to be able to turn back time. That is vital to your response. 2, train your users to exercise caution. This is a great idea, but it's failed us for the last 25 years, so I don't see why this is going to all of a sudden save us now. 3, use reputable AV software and firewalls. In fact, here at Infoscale, we are good friends of both Malwarebytes and AVG. So if you're looking for endpoint software that can help you protect against ransomware, we recommend both of those. 4, separate windows for backup and malware scanning. 5, keep your operating system antivirus and installed software patched and up to date. That's just good network hygiene. 6, show hidden file extensions. This is useful at the admin level, not necessarily the user level. 7, make sure that your email systems are filtering out executables. Again, just good practice. 8 and 9 and 10 are all just sort of good examples of ways to lock down your system, right? So none of this is new, guys. You've seen all of these recommendations before. Unfortunately, the state of computer security hygiene among our users is terrible. Unfortunately, the ransomware criminals are leveraging the exact same holes in our systems that other attacks have used for 20 years, whether that's phishing or whether that's just network vulnerabilities or outdated software or unpatched systems. So none of this is new. You've heard all of this before. But all of a sudden, you've got to think of it like this. All of a sudden, your enemy is out to make money, and so he's far more motivated than you are. Previously, you did this because it was part of your job, and the guys who are attacking you were out for kicks, by and large, unless you worked at a government facility or a large commercial enterprise. Now, sophisticated techniques are going to be thrown at you because the criminal on the other end of the line of that attack vector can make serious bank by beating you, right? And that's a huge disruption in the bad guy, good guy balance. Let's talk now about things you can do if you do get infected. Generally speaking, you've only got 2 options once you get that demand letter. Once you get that sort of, it's not the letter in the post where I have your cat and it's, spelled out with newspaper type, but it may as well be. It's usually a pop-up on your screen that says that they're going to destroy all your data. You've got 2 options, pay the ransom or restore your systems. The FBI will tell you pay the ransom unless you can quickly restore your systems to a point before the infection. And so this is where InfraScale comes in, okay? We are the people you call when you have experienced ransomware. So we joke a lot internally about the Taken films with Liam Neeson and the way that Liam Neeson's daughter is taken and then he goes and gets her back. Why is that appropriate? Well, here's an easy way to think about ransomware. You do want perimeter security from folks like AVG or Malwarebytes. They're going to stop you from getting infected by ransomware. But if your defenses do get penetrated, and if your data does get taken hostage, if it is kidnapped, and you are presented with a ransom note, you want somebody on your side who can go and get your data back. And that's where InfraScale comes in. We have a particular set of skills that allows you to roll back to the day before that the attack occurred. So what do you do when you get infected? First, get the machine in question off the network, particularly if it's Locky or some of these more advanced B2B strains. 2, we're going to turn back time on your BIOS to actually give you a bit more time before some of the destructive code kicks in. And 3, ideally, roll back to a previous image or backup set, and that's where InfraScale comes in. Another big problem with ransomware is this. People, so listen up, for those of you who have been bored by what I've been saying, what I'm about to say is super important. These ransomware attacks take place over weeks or months. They're slowly encrypting your system, and they're doing it in a non-intensive way so that they're not going to be detected. So think about a ransomware attack as this insidious virus entering your computer and slowly encrypting all of this data. And they'll usually start with the oldest files on your computer because these are the files that you're not likely to find. And so when you go to recover from ransomware, one of the hardest things about this is knowing which point in time should I roll back to. In fact, it's a devilish problem, right? Ransomware could have been slowly and quietly infecting all of the systems on my network for weeks, and I don't know when to roll back to. Here at InfraScale, we realized that we have the ability to help you with this problem. Because InfraScale will protect all of your devices across all device types. In fact, we work on endpoints like laptops and mobiles and tablets. We work on physical servers, Windows and Mac and Linux, and we work on virtual servers like running on VMware or Hyper-V. And because, therefore, our software has that complete view of your network, we can help detect when ransomware kicks in. So we've recently built out our anomaly detection functionality. And the way this works is when you're backing up all your stuff with InfraScale, whether it be servers or endpoints, we're watching and watching and watching. And if all of a sudden one node has a massive number of files being changed, either in their binary content or their file name or anything, we'll actually laser in and look at that and determine if it's a ransomware attack and notify you. We're the only backup and disaster recovery vendor in the world who's doing this type of thing. And frankly, it's grounded in InfraScale's long legacy history of investing in security and encryption. We believe that your data protection vendor should be also a security vendor. And so if you read about InfraScale, you'll learn about us, that our ultra-safe technology suite, frankly, has been a cornerstone of our offering for a decade now. And so as an extension of that, we're now detecting anomalies across your network and helping you detect not just if you've been infected by ransomware, but specifically the point in time that that infection occurred. And that's crucial to being able to roll back. And now another point to make here about the intersection between backup and ransomware is, all of the articles will tell you to use backup software, but here's what they don't mention. Most backup softwares age out content after a week or two. So you go to roll back from your backup, and guess what? The infection's still there because it took them weeks or months to encrypt your entire system before they hit you with the ransom note. So you've got to make certain that your BDR vendor allows you to roll back to any point in time. With InfraScale, we have this Forever Save feature, where by default, we'll let you roll back to any point in time. So in my case, as the founder of the company, I can roll back my computer to the year 2006, which is super awesome. So when I do my demos, it's kind of cool. I can literally take you back a decade and roll back my computer to a decade ago, right? And so you've got to find a vendor that won't age out your data. And frankly, even if you look at the big boys like the ArcServes and the Backup Execs and the Commvaults and the Moseys and the Carbines, all of them have a standard practice of aging our data within, say, a month, making them absolutely useless for any sort of protection against sophisticated ransomware attacks. So there are two approaches to handling sort of the rollback for ransomware in this modern era we live in. One is cloud backup and one is DRAS. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with DRAS, but it's really, frankly, the future of data protection, right? So here we have two diagrams, one on the left, one on the right. And the one on the left, it says cloud backup, but it's true of any backup system. Okay, in the top left we have the production node, and then there's a backup server, and it's copying data from the production node out to the blue box, which is basically a storage location. Maybe it's on-prem, maybe it's an offsite tape system, maybe it's in the cloud. Then a disaster happens, and here it's the spy versus spy icon that we have with the little yellow exclamation mark. Not sure why we went with spy versus spy, but disaster happens, and then you have the following steps. You have to copy data off the storage mechanism, then you have to reconfigure stuff, and then you boot. And that can take days. In fact, it generally does take days. The backup and recovery metaphor is absolutely rubbish for disaster recovery, and ransomware is a form of disaster. Now, I say this with some expertise. Prior to this, I was the founder and CEO of SOS Online Backup, a cloud backup company. If we think about what we do with DRAS, which is the right-hand side of this diagram, it's somewhat different. We still have our production node, and that is still being protected and copied to a off-site destination, right? So we sort of still have the 1, 2, 3 step here. And I wish we numbered these so it would be easier for me to refer to. But here's the fundamental difference. When a disaster occurs, in backup land, I have to copy data to new computers, reconfigure and boot, and that can take days. In DRAS, I don't have to copy anything. I'm going to auto-magically stand up an entire data center around where that data is and run there. Now that could be on the hot red box on-prem if you're running one of the on-site InfraScale cloud failover appliances, or that could be out in the cloud. In either case, we guarantee that within 15 minutes we will boot up your entire environment, on-prem or in the cloud. Now why is this crucial? It's crucial because with ransomware, you don't know when you were affected, although we can help you determine that. But fundamentally, we can help you sort of bring back your entire network, not just one server, but an entire data center at the push of a button. If you think about ransomware, it's just like a flood or a fire, right? It's something that will cripple your operational capabilities. And if you think about your traditional disaster when it comes to data and uptime, it always happens at 2 in the morning, usually at 2 in the morning on a Saturday night when you might have had a big night on a Friday. And what's your job? Your job then is to get out of bed, put your boots on, go down to the data center, start copying stuff and bring things online. And it probably takes you 24 hours to do that entire thing. Well, recently, Infrascale was called a visionary by Gartner for disaster recovery as a service. And last year we were called a cool vendor by Gartner for disaster recovery as a service. Here's the leading IT analyst firm on planet Earth. Why are they picking us to do this? Well, let me tell you the process you go through when you get hit by a disaster and you're running Infrascale. You don't get out of bed, put your boots on, get in the car and drive to the data center. You know what you do? You roll over, you grab your iPad Pro, you log into the Infrascale portal, find the office that's been affected, and then you click Run. And now an automated runbook is going to go through and reconstruct and reconfigure, rehydrate all of the servers in your application clusters in your data center. In fact, they're not just going to bring back one server, they're going to bring back up to 200 servers of yours within 15 minutes or less guaranteed, with a pre-configured and pre-orchestrated and pre-tested DR runbook. Put another way, you're going to be able to click those buttons from your iPad Pro, verify your services are up and running, roll over and go back to sleep. Because Infrascale delivers peace of mind when it comes to data protection, whether that is coming from the threat of ransomware or from physical flood or from human error or any other sort of impactor that can take down your network. So where do we go from here? Right now we're actually going to jump to another poll. So Tracy, can you hear me? Do you want to read this one out or should I do it?
Hey, I can go ahead with this poll if you'd like. I can hear you. You can hear me fine?
We can hear you.
Great. When it comes to BDR, which of these is you? I can confidently roll back to a previous backup anytime. I wish I had backup and recovery, but can't afford that. Or I still don't think I'll be affected by ransomware. So if you can take a minute and look over the various different answers and respond, we'd really appreciate your response. And the question again is, when it comes to BDR, which of these is you? Okay, I think I will go ahead and push the results out for you, Ken.
Sure thing. I mean, the real question for the audience here is not whether or not you can recover, but whether you can do it super quickly, right? So we've got, I believe this is a disproportionate poll result. 63% of you are saying you can confidently roll back to a previous backup anytime. You know, I think I should have rewritten this question. The question really should have been, I can confidently roll back to a point in time within 20 minutes or within 60 minutes, right? So I bet a good chunk of you in that 63% bucket actually will take a day or two. I think you're the guy that I was talking about who gets called at 2 in the morning, has to put his boots on, get in his car and drive to the data center, right? And if you've got to do that, well, you've already kind of failed, right? The average cost of downtime in North America for businesses is $100,000 an hour. And of course that scales up and down depending on how big your business is. But if you have to put your boots on, you've already failed. And there's another good line to remember from this webinar. If you can't bring back your network from your iPad without leaving your bed, you're not properly protected. But let's plumb on here so we can get to the Q&A. How much have Infrascale customers paid out in ransomware? $0. So we do this all day long, and we get a lot of, we have great case study after case study of people who call us up and say, oh my God, we've been, you know, my data has been taken hostage. My data has been kidnapped. Should I pay the ransom? And our attitude is no, we have a particular set of skills, and we are going to get your data back for you. And that's the role that we play in your IT security infrastructure. So, next steps. We would love to give you free access to our product. We'd also love to talk to you. We'd also love to bring you to some of our lunch and learns that we do all around the country all the time. So if anything we've talked about today interests you, or if you think that perhaps you could make your backup and disaster recovery infrastructure more robust, then please do reach out to us and get in touch. We'll give you a free deployment of our solution to test it out and check it out. To do this, you can contact team@infrascale.com. You can also contact me, ken@infrascale.com. And in general, we just love to participate in a conversation with you about the way that the sort of cybersecurity landscape is changing and the way that BDR technology and traditional endpoint perimeter security are collapsing together. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do a Q&A, but please remember those email addresses, team@infrascale.com or ken@infrascale.com. And if you'd like to talk to someone or to get a demo or to get a free evaluation system deployed in your network, or we can even ship out an appliance so that you can run it in your data center and see how great our solution is, then please feel free to do that. And frankly, if you'd just like to give me tips on why we can improve this content, I'd love that too. Tracy, I went a little longer than anticipated, so now I'm going to turn it over to you. I think we have a final poll and then some Q&A. If it's okay with you, Tracy, I'm happy to go past the top of the hour because we haven't sort of gotten to the Q&A quite as quickly as I thought we would.
Sure, no problem. And I'll go ahead and ask you the first question and push out that poll. And the first question is, does your software use some type of backup imaging process?
We do. So within our software, you've actually got two different modes that one can choose from. There's an image-based solution and then a file folder-based solution. So for different deployment types, you're going to, the user can pick between those for what is most appropriate, and we support both.
Okay, how about this? Does using cloud storage reduce the risks or decrease the amount of time required to recover?
Using cloud storage in the context of ransomware is sort of a little quixotic. It decreases the risks that ransomware can corrupt your data, but it increases the time to recovery. This is why you should look into DRAS, or Disaster Recovery as a Service. And as Gartner just said, Infrascale is one of the leading visionaries in the DRAS space. Because with DRAS, you have the safety of offsite storage and cloud, but the speed of instant recovery, and we guarantee that we'll bring up your network in 15 minutes or less. So ask our professionals about our DRAS offering, and that's going to give you the best of all worlds.
Okay, how about, what is the principal way that a system gets infected? Is it always a result of a user mistake?
Yes and no. Usually the first penetration of a network is going to be tied to a user activity, right? It could be a drive-by download on a website where, the user's browser hasn't been appropriately patched. It could be a phishing expedition. After that, however, some of the more sophisticated strains of ransomware, like Locky, will self-propagate across the network. So, it is true to say that there's always some human activity that allows ransomware in, but most of the propagation is then going to happen within the network after that, right? Which is why you need a layered defense strategy, and frankly, the ability to turn back time is the ultimate defense strategy.
Okay, and here we have another question. So if they do this over a period of time, how do you know the date that you would roll back to?
That's a great question. This is where Infrascale's anomaly detection feature is very, very powerful. Normally you wouldn't know. So normally you would find out that you've been infected by ransomware and have no bloody clue what day to roll back things to, even if you can roll them back to. You'd be guessing. With Infrascale, we can actually tell you when you were infected with a high degree of certainty and then help you roll back to it. So not only do we have the unlimited retention that lets you roll back to any point in time, but we also have the anomaly detection for ransomware specifically that allows you to know with high fidelity when that attack originated and the date to which you should roll back.
Okay, here's another interesting question. What's the minimum data retention you recommend? Wouldn't it be incredibly expensive to store a decade's worth of data in the cloud?
Depends who you use. I mean, you're absolutely right that with some vendors like a Commvault or or ArcServe or a Veritas or a Datto would be incredibly expensive to store a decade's worth of data. Infrascale uses a very powerful block-based deduplication file system called DDFS. In fact, it's one of our patented technologies that means that we can store a decade of your data without any additional cost to you. So when you buy from us a 1 terabyte plan, that 1 terabyte plan includes unlimited archiving of previous data from that account. right? It's really amazing technology, and we've been doing this for quite a long time, but we set out to build an incredibly efficient deduplicating global file system that was, frankly, this is before it was called cloud, right? These days you'd call it a distributed cloud file system. And that allows us to store data for a decade without charging you anything for it. It's just built into the price point that you pay. And to give you a sense of our price point, it's around $100 a terabyte. It's very, very cost effective.
Okay, thank you. And here's another question. Do you recover individual workstations also?
Absolutely. So Emprascale works across three major form factors: endpoints, physical servers, and virtual servers. When I say an endpoint, I'm talking about a laptop or a desktop. I can even be talking about a tablet computer. And we run across all the major operating systems, most obviously Windows and Mac. When I say physical servers, I'm talking about Windows and Linux and Unix and other physical servers where the operating system's running on metal. And of course, for those of you in data center environments, most of you are virtualized. So we have native hypervisor support, agentless protection for Hyper-V and for VMware.
Okay, and here's another question. I want a little bit more detail about your disaster recovery as a service architecture. Can you expand on that a little?
Well, firstly, I'd recommend you go to our website and download the Gartner report on disaster recovery as a service. That'll give you a great sort of analysis of why we are the visionary and why we are one of the top companies in this DRAS space. Secondly, I would love to walk you through that. I think Glenn was the one asking that question. So Glenn, feel free to email me at ken@emprascale.com, and I can go into the weeds with you as much as you like.
Okay, and how about what is Reset Your BIOS?
The BIOS is sort of the heartbeat of your computer. So when you, remember when you boot your computer, you usually get like a black screen. These days, the OEMs kind of rebrand it, but that old black screen that would push numbers and you can hit F2 to go in and do stuff. Basically what you can do is roll back time on your computer, and it tricks the computer into thinking it's a different date. Now, if your ransomware payload has a time bomb in it, so it says that on July 4th we're going to delete all this data, by resetting your BIOS time, you can actually make sure that you have more time to heal things, right? So it's basically just a way of tricking your computer into changing the date.
Here's another question. How can 63% of the participants guarantee that all of their PCs can roll back? That is my concern. My servers, yes, but my PCs, I'm not so sure about.
Yeah, so look, I agree. The data we collected in today's survey is very misleading, okay? So the question should have been, how many of you can roll back your network, so multiple nodes, to a single point in time within 30 minutes? And then the answer would have been hardly any. In fact, let me put this to the audience now. How many of you can roll back your whole network to a specific point in time within 30 minutes? Not one machine, the whole network. Right? Now, I bet if you all start typing to the questions tool, we'll get a much better flavor. Can you roll back your whole network to a specific point in time in 30 minutes or less?
So here's another question, and that is your solution HIPAA compliant?
Absolutely it is. So security has always been a core pillar of the Emprascale sort of sales proposition. And our UltraSafe technology is compatible with HIPAA, with PCI, with SARBOX, with CJIS, with FINRA. In fact, we're the most compliant of any of the BDR vendors on the market. Some of our customers include the Department of Justice, many police departments across the country, many cities and municipalities across the country. And so we've got a strong background serving the law enforcement community and making certain that double-blind encryption and the compliance with all of the major security standards has been key to our strategy since the beginning of the company.
Okay. And, there is another question about your company, and it's how old is your company?
Emprascale was founded in 2011. Emprascale's got 155 employees, and our mission in life is to eradicate downtime and data loss, the two twin evils that are inhibiting the U.S. economy to the tune of $100 billion a year. Our major political candidates don't talk about this, but they should. This is a problem that should be a matter of national debate. $100 billion a year is siphoned out of our economy because of downtime and data loss. And Infrascale, although a small vendor, is absolutely laser-focused on solving the twin evils of and eradicating downtime and data loss.
Thank you so much. And we still have plenty of questions for you, Ken. So here's another one. Is there some kind of early detection system that can be built if I keep checking my files to see if they are encrypted?
So yeah, that's I think this is from Bo. Bo, that's that's the core feature of our anomaly detection system. So when I was talking about our anomaly detection capability earlier, we are unique among all BDR vendors in that we will help detect for you that you've been infected, and better than that, we'll tell you when you were infected.
Okay. Great. And here's another question. Do you protect against non-ransomware threats?
Well, we'll protect against any threat where the best solution is to roll back to the day before, right? So if that is a virus or if that is just corruption of your system, yes, we can help you roll back to solve any problem.
Okay. How about, are you implementing a software-defined network to perform the failover?
We do indeed. So in the cloud, we'll set up a virtual private cluster for you, which is all there on a virtual switch for you. It's your own private environment with all of your servers interconnected. We'll do IP address translation and remap all of the IP addresses that you had in your local configuration. Or put more simply, if your building burns down, I'll reconstruct your data center in 15 minutes or less, so long as you have up to 200 servers. If you have more than that, then we'd need to put a couple of pods in place. But we're the only vendor who can do this, and we're not just about bringing back one server like Datto, which frankly is a toy solution, right? What we're going to do is bring back an entire application cluster or an entire data center.
Okay. How about, I'm talking about the $100, looks like $100 terabyte. Is that per month or year?
That pricing is per month, so you'll find that our pricing is some of the lowest in the industry and the most comprehensive in terms of functionality. So, for example, our DRAS pricing is $129 per terabyte per month.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see. That's quite it. Do you have any higher ed customers?
Many. In fact, education is one of our biggest markets. So if you looked at our biggest markets, they are education, healthcare, state and local government, municipalities, and law enforcement. So we have education customers all across the country. We offer a wonderful discount program for them. There's another question here from Betsy that asks if this is CJIS compliant, CJIS. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's the Criminal Justice Information System standard, I believe. It's what you need to be compliant with if you're storing, say, police and municipal data, and we are CJIS compliant. And so, yes, state, local, education, higher ed in whether it's K through 12, frankly, or tertiary, as well as then financial services and healthcare are our core markets.
Okay, and how about a specific size of business where your services are beneficial?
In general, we target firms from about 100 employees to about 2,500 employees. Our technology scales higher than that, and we have some customers. Our largest customer is 45,000 nodes on the system. But from a sales and marketing perspective, where we really sort of focus in is 100 to 2,500. We're very partner-friendly, so if you're an IT reseller on the line, please get in touch. We've got 750 channel partners around the world, and that's a core network for end users. Because of our powerful partner network, we can have somebody in your office tomorrow. So if you're in Poughkeepsie, we can have somebody there. If you're in Berlin, we can have somebody there. If you're in Edinburgh or if you're in Melbourne, Australia, we can have somebody there. And so we're a global provider, mainly in English-speaking countries, although we do have our own data center grid operating at 16 points of presence around the world.
Here's another interesting question, and is encryption of their data the only way that ransomware works?
No, it's not. Earlier versions of ransomware were sort of called blockers, where they would do things like redirect your master boot tables, or they would redirect the shell executable within the Windows environment, like Explorer.exe, and would sort of lock you out of your system. These lockout variants, though, were relatively easy to overcome. And so it's the more modern sort of asymmetric crypto ransomware variants that are scarier, particularly these ones that will then sort of self-propagate over a network. Those are very scary. Generally speaking, you know, the earlier lockout variants are relatively easy to overcome.
Okay. How about how frequently can backups be taken realistically or practically?
Most of our customers are doing 2 snapshots an hour, so every 30 minutes, maybe 1 an hour, but very frequently.
Okay. And and can you protect live databases?
Absolutely. So whether that be SQL Server or Exchange, Active Directory, whether that be Oracle, protecting mission-critical workloads is core to what we do. So at Infrascale, we're all about protecting your full production environment, from endpoints through to your data center apps, through to your mission-critical workloads and your ERP systems.
I think the question here is, can you roll back to a specific time, not in 30 minutes? Probably take a day to rebuild your small environment.
Yeah, so I think Gerald might have been responding there to my question of how long would it take him to come back online, and so he's saying it would take a day to rebuild his small environment. A day is a long time, right? So we have a customer who is a meat packing and distribution company, fairly low tech, but a day of downtime for them is $600,000 in lost sales, right? And so one of the things I always tell my clients is, look, you've got to calculate how much revenue do you have in the year, divide that by 365 days, or 220 if you want to go business days, and then figure out what is a day cost you in lost revenue, right? So, you know, my question back to Gerald would be, Gerald, if you take your business's annual revenue and divide it by 220, what is that worth? Because that's the cost you're facing, right, to rebuild your entire environment in a day.
Here's another one. If we're not presently using Infrascale's disaster recovery as a service, how can you handle a ransomware infection if you can't tell when the infection occurred?
Well, the benefit of our technology is that we can determine when the infection occurred and help you roll back. And we're the only BDR vendor we're aware of in the market who can do this for you.
Quite a few here. Let me go through this. Okay. What is the average number of days between infection and discovery?
Usually a month or so. So it's, you know, usually sitting there working for weeks before you find out about it. That's what's so insidious.
Oh, okay. What is the strongest encryption you are allowed to use?
Allowed to use, that's a good question. In our case, we are seeing RSA asymmetric encryption at 1024 and even 2048 bits of encryption used. When you say allowed to use, the folks involved in these sorts of attacks don't really give a crap what they're allowed to use. They're using the strongest encryption they can use, right? So they're not following the rules. Generally speaking, symmetric AES 256-bit is the highest level of encryption that commercial enterprises in the United States will use. But these guys are using whatever they can get their hands on.
Okay. Here's another good question. If you think you may have been infected, is there a quick way to check?
There are. You know, there are good tools available from folks like Malwarebytes, who have a free ransomware scanner that I recommend. And so, you know, again, Malwarebytes is a good friend of Infrascale. So using a free tool like that will help you. Make sure you get it from a reputable source, though.
So we're about 6 after. Do you still have time? Do you want to do a couple more minutes, or what do you think?
We can. So I've got time, and we have an awful number of questions here on the line. So, you know, happy to keep going for a few more minutes. And Carla, I'm sure, is tallying who is winning that Xbox or drone or whatever it is we're going to be giving away today.
That's great. That'll be fun. Okay. Can ransomware get into a Microsoft SQL database and encrypt it?
Yes, it can. Yeah, any file that's being stored on a Windows-based file system is vulnerable. So, they can go right in there and encrypt your MDFs or your LDFs, or even worse, the binaries of SQL Server itself. So disabling a SQL cluster is relatively easy for most ransomware strains.
Okay. And can ransomware encrypt a VMD file or a Hyper-V virtual server file?
Absolutely, it can, yeah. So again, that gets scarier, right? Because once ransomware starts to encrypt things like VMDKs or, MDS and LDS, they're not just encrypting a single file, they're taking down complete functional applications and even clusters. And so those are now high-value targets for ransomware would be to encrypt a VMDK or other operational files associated with the hypervisor.
Okay. A long question, but let's go for it. Do you believe the ransomware criminals will evolve to the point where they become capable of overcoming Infrascale's ability to restore to a safe time? And if so, how do you see your solution evolving to meet that threat?
Well, look, we think about this all the time, and no, I don't think so, because ultimately we help you roll back to a point in time, and eventually you can roll back to a point in time that is safe. And so we are ever vigilant, and we are paying great attention to this threat, and we're helping our customers and our clients and our partners make sure that they have the peace of mind that comes from knowing they can roll back to the day before. So we're very confident in our solution, and we will continue to protect our customers and our clients and our partners from this threat.
Great. And then how do you determine when the infection happened?
We do that through our anomaly detection capability that can detect changes in the network. And because we can all of a sudden start to see hundreds of files or thousands of files being changed in a short period of time, we know that something funky is up.
And here's a question. Should all systems in a network be restored?
It depends on the extent of the infection. I mean, usually, if you've got a multi-system infection, then absolutely you want to restore all of the affected systems.
What prevents backup from being encrypted or infected?
Great question. And this is going to go to the type of the backup system you're running and whether or not the system that you're working with actually sort of is aware of this issue. In our case, we are alert to this, and we make sure that our system cannot be accessed just on file handles from an infected host, whereas systems like one of our direct competitors, for example, whose name I mentioned earlier, they actually provide their data right there on the network that can be infected. And so here you've got a backup and disaster recovery vendor who exposes data in a way that allows ransomware to encrypt all of it. So you think you're protected, then you go to recover and you're absolutely screwed. So with Infrascale, we've got it completely containered off and virtualized away from the network so that any errant process, or in particular ransomware on the local network, cannot access our data over CIFS or NFS and therefore cannot promulgate their infection to our backup store and archive.
How about this? Can you function as a business continuity service?
Well, we are a business continuity service. That's a great question. When Gartner called us their cool vendor, they actually named us cool vendor for business continuity and disaster recovery. So at the end of the day, our mission is to eradicate downtime. And what we're trying to do is make sure that your business has continuity of operations no matter what sort of disaster you're hit with, whether that's a flood, a fire, or a ransomware attack from Lockheed.
Here we have another question, and it's just they're asking if it's a bare metal restore, I believe.
Sorry, Tracy, what was the question?
The question is just bare metal restore ?
We do support bare metal restore, and we're doing that across multiple platforms. So it's very easy to recover your data back to similar hardware or dissimilar hardware.
Go.
And Tracy,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Tracy, we're actually going to have to wrap up the webinar here. So I guess here's a few comments, folks. There's a ton of questions on the line we didn't get to. and we're going to get to those. We're going to email you answers, okay? So that's really important. Secondly, I think Tracy's had a poll up for a little while here to see if you'd like to hear more from us. I hope you selected that you would, because then we're going to reach out to you. We're going to understand better the troubles that you're facing, and we're going to try and solve them with our product. Remember that 60-day free evaluation. Also, I really want to encourage you to reach out to us. Team@infrascale.com will get you to Carla, or Ken@infrascale.com will get you me. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to show you our technology. We'd just love to help advise you on how to best protect your environment. Now, we've also got the Xbox winner. So that is Joel Corwin from Emitech. Joel, if you are still on the line, mate, type into the questions tool your phone number and email address, and Carla will be in touch to coordinate getting you the prize of your choice, whether that's the Xbox, the drone, or the PlayStation. And I think that's going to bring us to the end of things. Tracy, did I miss anything?
No, but you did a fabulous job today with your presentation and the Q&A. So thank you so much. We appreciate you taking so much time with all the information you provided. Is there anything else before I thank the audience that you want to say, or are we good to go?
We just want folks to remember that InfraScale has its mission to eradicate downtime and data loss, and that's the ultimate protection against ransomware and all sorts of other evils that threaten our computing and system uptime. And so we really appreciate you all coming to this webinar. I think we're going to be doing a few more together with Virtualization Review, and look forward to seeing you at those.
Terrific, and thanks again so much. Just to remind everybody, this was sponsored by InfraScale, presented by Virtualization Review. We'd like to thank the audience again, and everybody, enjoy the rest of your day.